Hello and welcome to the 23rd 2020 NHL Draft recap here at Scouching. Today we're going to be looking at the Buffalo Sabres, and they have had a tumultuous offseason this year with enormous amounts of turnover in their organization. And I have not been a big fan of exactly how they've drafted in prior years in the draft, and from my perspective, 2020 wasn't that much of a step in the right direction. At 8th overall, they started off by drafting Jakub Quinn. Now, I was pleasantly surprised with some of the metrics that I tracked of Jakub Quinn in the games that I saw, but to see him go ahead of his teammate Marco Rossi this year, when they're both comparable in age group, was to say the least surprising. I think Jakub Quinn does have areas where he shows a little bit better than Marco Rossi. Predominantly the play in the offensive zone, sending pucks in front of the net and getting those dangerous scoring chances from medium danger were things that Jakub Quinn did at least at the same level or in some areas better than Marco Rossi did per 60 minutes. But when I look at Marco Rossi, I see a player who is far more impactful in all areas of the ice and driving 5-on-5 impact much better than Jakub Quinn. And when you go a level deeper and try to project both of these players in that area of the game to the NHL, I really believe that it's more likely that Jakub Quinn will be a bit of an underwhelming 5-on-5 player, especially outside of the offensive zone. His defensive transition ability was far less notable than Marco Rossi's. His offensive transition ability wasn't necessarily as good, but it was still fine. But I still question his raw skating ability and ability to push those offensive transitions with NHL level pace, something that Marco Rossi did to me more often. So to me, Jakub Quinn is a player that in the right circumstances could score a lot of points in the NHL. If you put him on a power play and maybe have him on your second line with a real dynamic two-way center who can get him the puck in the offensive zone, I certainly see a valuable piece for the Buffalo Sabres here. And I say this in a lot of these recaps because it really needs to be reiterated over and over. It's not necessarily about the specific player that you're drafting. I think Jakub Quinn is going to be a useful player, but I don't know how you look at the board and the names that were available, most notably Marco Rossi and Cole Perfetti and even Anton Lundell, and look at Jakub Quinn as the best player available. Maybe he was just the Buffalo Sabres' guy at that pick, but frankly, I think you need to use especially your top 10 picks on the most high-impact potential talent that you can find. Jakub Quinn could be a really good complementary offensive scoring winger. I certainly could see that out of him. But there's a lot of things that need to go right to get Jakub Quinn in a position where he can put the puck in the net that I don't think Jakub Quinn will be particularly involved in the NHL down the road. It's entirely possible that I could be wrong one day, and I was definitely surprised with some of the results that Quinn put up in the games that I tracked, but I still was not sure about this pick for the Buffalo Sabres. However, at 34th, they took Jason Peterka, another winger who I think could be a rock-solid NHL player. He's got a great sense of work ethic and drive and determination with a really good set of feet under him and some really underrated skill that didn't necessarily come out as often as I hoped. I think there's a lot of potential for Peterka. He was a player that really showed a good example of a player where his line mates weren't really doing a lot of the heavy lifting that he was really trying to do. Suppressing defensive transitions was a high point. Enabling offensive transitions with control was also a high point for him. He was doing that a lot. He was trying to generate offensively very well, but the shot metrics and overall danger metrics weren't that great for him when he was on the ice. So he's doing a lot of the things that are ingredients in that soup that you need, and he's very good at them. So I hope that in better circumstances with better line mates or more ice time, better positive results can start showing up, because I think there's a lot of potential for Peterka. I don't think he's a top 6 scoring winger who's going to shoot the lights out every night, but a play-driving, enabling two-way winger with really good instincts both on and off the puck could be something that I see out of Peterka with a few more years of development overseas. The Buffalo Sabres then took a 4-hour lunch break and came back in 131st, drafting Matteo Constantini. Constantini was right in their backyard all year, playing for the Buffalo Junior Sabres, and yes, he scored a lot, but he also scored a lot in the OJHL, and I only saw a little bit of Constantini last year, and I didn't really see enough that moved the needle enough for me to really put him on my list. He really reminded me of a player like Eric Ciccolini from last year, who was a high-scoring OJHL player with some good skill, but not a whole lot of those other talents that need to be put together in order to really solidly project him as an NHL player. I'm not sure what it was that the Buffalo Sabres saw in Constantini outside of a player playing Junior A right in their backyard that they saw all the time, and maybe they liked him wearing Buffalo Sabres colors. But I've seen time and time again really high-level OJHL players go to the NCAA and, to say the least, struggle. I'm not a huge fan of junior A leagues in Canada outside of British Columbia in certain cases, and to me, Matteo Constantini is a player that maybe you could have gotten later, and if you couldn't, there was probably better players available at 131, but you can give him some time in college. He's got 3 or 4 years to develop, and then the Buffalo Sabres can decide what to do from there. The Sabres then took another very long break and came back at 193rd and drafted Albert Lyckåsen from Linköping in Sweden. Now, I have seen this team play a lot, and Lyckåsen is a player that actually has stood out for me on a number of occasions. He's a high-flying, aggressive, offensive defenseman who I think perfectly earned the right to a draft pick, which is why he was on my watch list at the end of the season. He's a lot of fun to watch. I think his defensive instinct still needs some work, but they did take a big step from his first time being draft eligible to last season, and I really do like the skill and aggressive offensive instincts that you see from him. He's an exciting player, and I'm certainly interested where he's going to end up with the Buffalo Sabres, if ever, on their depth chart, because I think there's an exciting player hidden away here. The Sabres then used the second last pick in this year's draft to take Jakub Konecny out of Sparta Prague in the Czech Junior League. Now, I don't get to see a tremendous amount of the Czech Junior League, and whenever I do, I don't see it as necessarily the highest level league. So when you see a player who is well under a point per game there, and just barely over a point per game as a D+1 prospect this season so far, I guess you have to find it a little bit underwhelming. I thought there were better players that went undrafted, which is something we'll get to after this recap series is over. But Konecny, I guess at 216, you can't really complain too much, and I guess we'll have to wait and see. They have 4 years to watch him develop. I can't say I've seen enough of him to really make a hugely detailed review of his game, but I just look at his statistical profile and see a long shot at best. So for the Buffalo Sabres, I'm going to give them a 2F. I think Jack Quinn is going to be a perfectly capable second-line offensive player for the Sabres down the road, especially if he's paired with some more dynamic two-way impact centers down the line. And I think Jason Peterka will at least be a serviceable NHL player in some way, whether it's a third-line energy guy with some offensive output, or a second-line power forward with a bit of skill to him as well. I could see a number of avenues for Peterka based on the natural style of play that he has. Beyond that, I really like the swing on Albert Lyckåsen. I think he's got some nice skill and enough talent on paper and what I've seen with my eyes to warrant being a D+1 draft pick this year. Matteo Constantini and Jakub Konecny, we'll see. I don't really know. I've looked at the Czech Junior League over the last few years a number of times with guys that I've really valued as scoring leaders in those leagues, and rarely do they ever turn out. With Matteo Constantini, similar things can be said about the OJHL. It is rare to find players in the OJHL turn into serviceable NHL players. It's not impossible, I just don't see it happen a tremendous amount, and what I have seen of Constantini doesn't really blow me away, especially for a guy that went to 131. So I feel like there was just a little bit of wasted potential with the Buffalo Sabres this year in the draft, but it wasn't all that bad. I think they're going to end up with 2 serviceable NHL players, one of whom will have some really solid offensive potential, one of whom will have some really solid offensive ability, and the other has the potential to be the same. So we'll see what happens, but for a team with as much turnover organizationally as they had, I didn't really see as many big swings at these very important picks that personally I would have liked. So that's all for the Buffalo Sabres recap. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon or here on YouTube by clicking join below. You'll get access to a Discord server, early access to videos, as well as plenty of other goodies that you can check out in a variety of Patreon tiers. Or you can pick up some merchandise at the Scouching shop, where 50% of all profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and we'll see you in the next one, where we look at the Florida Panthers.